Okay, we are live streaming. I'm going to call the meeting to order. At this time, I'd like to remind council, municipal staff, and members of the public in attendance that this electronic public meeting is being live streamed to the public. A video recording of this meeting will be available to the public on the township website. Physical attendance of the public at this meeting is not permitted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is Madawaska Valley's second virtual planning meeting. We will endeavor to conduct this meeting following the normal process, but please note that unanticipated issues that may arise could affect that process. I'd like to thank the applicants for their patience and understanding of the need to organize this meeting through the use of technology. The municipality has made every effort to ensure all affected property owners were informed and are able to participate in this planning process. And with that, I'll ask the CAO to read the first section, the note on the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the purposes of the Planning Act is to provide for planning processes that are open, accessible, timely, and efficient. Accordingly, all written submissions, documents, correspondence, emails, or other communications, including your name and address, form part of the public record and will be disclosed, made available by the municipality to such persons as the municipality sees fit, including anyone requesting such information. Accordingly, in providing such information, you shall be deemed to have consented to its use and disclosure as part of the planning process.
Thank you. Application number 1, file number PSU-2020-03. The purpose is to hear persons' comments in regards to zoning bylaw amendment. Application made by the applicant, Matthew J. Bradley, Howe and Bradley Professional Corporation, owner 2672599, Ontario Incorporated, Mateus Suti. Oh, sorry, I'm going to mess this up. Suti. Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Larbetsky to take us through the application.
Thank you, Mayor Love.
And Mr. Larbetsky, your camera is off. Where did he go? Okay, can you turn your camera on?
I'm trying and it's not happening unless now.
Not yet.
No.
Okay. That's what
We can hear you.
The host is coming. Just having some technical difficulties. There, finally.
Here we are.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I apologize for that. We'll start with item 2.1, the application dated March 5th, 2020, forms pages 5 to 14. Are there any questions relating to the application itself?
From council? I don't see any questions in relation to the application.
Very good. Item 2.2 is notice of complete application dated April the 9th, 2020. Item 2.3 is page 1 of the cover letter from the County of Renfrew dated April the 8th, 2020. Item 2.4 is the County of Renfrew Planning Division Zoning Bylaw Amendment Report to Council, which is dated April the 9th, 2020. Number 3, the purpose and effect of the zoning bylaw amendment is the subject lands are 7,163 square meters in area and contain an existing restaurant. The purpose and effect of the amendment is to add retail store as a permitted use in the Tourism Commercial Exception 1 TC-E1 zone. A retail store means a building or a part of a building in which goods, wares, merchandise, substance, articles, or things are offered or kept for sale at retail, but does not include any establishment otherwise defined herein or specifically named elsewhere in this bylaw. The applicant stated in the application that he is intending to apply to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, AGCO, for a license to establish a cannabis retail location on the subject lands. The Township of Madawaska Valley has opted in to permit the sale of cannabis, which would be considered as a retail use. All other provisions of the zoning bylaw shall apply. Item number 4, report on the application and notice. 4.1, the notice of application and public meeting were sent out to all affected property owners within 120 meters, which is the equivalent of 400 feet of the subject application, and to all public bodies as required on June the 11th, 2020. Item number 4.2, notice was posted on the subject property on June the 11th, 2020. Item number 5, notice to public bodies, written responses and/or telephone messages. Item 5.1, Ontario Power Generation, Inc., email dated June the 11th, 2020, no comments or concerns. Item 5.2, Public Works Department, County of Renfrew, email dated June the 23rd, 2020, no comments or concerns. Moving on to item number 6, verbal report or general or telephone inquiries. At this point, I would just like to inform everyone that the agenda had to be amended because there was late incoming information once the agenda was published. So maybe I'll just do that if I could, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
The addition of item 6.9, and I will read through it, so I'll just list where the numbers are. Item 6.10 was an addition. And item 7.57 was an addition. 7.58 was an addition. 7.59 was an addition. And 7.60 was an addition. Moving all the way down to item 15, 15.10 was an addition, and 15.11 was an addition. Thank you. And I will now go back to item number 6.1. On June the 16th, 2020, a phone call was received from Courtney A. Burnett, questions relating to the requirement of a site plan. Item 6.2, on June the 17th, 2020, Stephanie Park, concerns relating to right-of-way and will provide written submission. Item 6.3, June the 18th, 2020, Stephanie Park, question relating to timeline for appeal to LPAT, and in brackets it was told 20 days and the cost is $300. And is looking for survey of her property, advised to check with her solicitor. Item 6.4, June the 22nd, 2020, Robert B. Howell, inquiry regarding the requirement of a site plan agreement. Item 6.5, June the 23rd, 2020, Jonathan Pratt, inquiring as to when property was zoned tourist commercial, TC, was advised it was prior to amalgamation and he should check with the County of Renfrew. Item 6.6, June the 29th, Stephanie Park, civic addressing question, issue with insurance provider because of shared right-of-way, advised to speak to her lawyer. Item 6.7, June the 29th, 2020, Peter Buchlinski, asking if email acceptable form of objection. Item 6.8, July the 2nd, 2020, Courtney A. Burnett, requesting to be a participant at public meeting, including Brian Whitehead from JP2G Consultants, Inc. Item 6.9, July the 6th, 2020, Diane Harrison, and I'm just elaborating a little here, request to make submission regarding the smear campaign regarding the Bent Anchor restaurant. Item 6.10, July the 7th, 2020, Marlene Duda, request to be added as an attendee at the meeting. I will stop at this point and ask through you, Madam Mayor, if there's any questions relating to the verbal inquiries.
Okay, I'm looking at council. I'm not seeing council has any questions. Council was provided with the additions that you spoke of via email, so they have seen them and read them. Sue.
Just a comment as it pertains to some of the emails we had received. One of the letters dated June 30th included in the planning package referenced a GoFundMe page and a boycott page on Facebook, as well as a planned protest on July 18th, and this has been forwarded to the OPP and bylaw. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Could would you like to continue, Mr. Lurbetsky, with number 7?
Yes, you'll have to bear with me. I cannot read the content of the submissions, whether email or letter, but I will, for the record, I will read the emails and letters that were received. So council has had and the public have had information on the submissions. So I will leave that to council for consideration later on in the meeting. So I will start with item 7.1. On June the 11th, 2020, email was sent to the municipal apartments. That gives the notice of application and electronic meeting. 7.2, June the 11th, Hydro One Networks Inc., notice of application and electronic meeting. Item 7.3, Ontario Power Generation Inc., notice of application and electronic meeting. June 11th, 2020, email to applicant, notice of application and electronic meeting. These items normally get sent out by regular mail. However, because of the COVID-19, they had requested that they be notified electronically. That is the reason for those first items. Item 7.5, June the 11th, email to staff providing them with the planning report. Item 7.6, June the 17th, 2020, email from Ray Pastway, information request. Item 7.7, June the 17th, email from Ray Pastway, requesting notification list and explanation of zoning request. Item 7.8, June the 18th, and including June the 22nd, 2020, email from David Henstock and response. Item 7.9, June the 22nd, 2020, email from David Teslick, request to attend public meeting electronically. Item 7.10, June the 24th, 2020, email from Jonathan Pratt, requesting copy of our plan 49R-17051. On item 7.11, June the 25th, 2020, email response to Jonathan Pratt, which include survey. Item 7.12, June the 24th, 2020, letter from Helen, Pat, and Rosemary Fritz. Item 7.13, June the 24th, 2020, letter from Margaret Wada. Item 7.14, June the 24th, 2020, letter from Fred and Ursula Day. Item 7.15, June the 26th, 2020, letter from Paul James Dwyer. Item 7.16, June 28, 2020, email from Ivana Mooney on behalf of Reverend Bob Hill. Item 7.17, June the 29th, email from Gwen Dombrowski in response to request from Mr. Tesla. Item 7.18, June the 30th, 2020, letter from Rod Mins. Item 7.19, June the 30th, 2020, letter from Anne Bruder. Item 7.20, June the 30th, 2020, letter from Teresa M. Buklinski. Item 7.21, June the 30th, letter from Ted M. Buklinski. Item 7.22, June the 30th, letter from Mecca Tuman. Item 7.23, June the 30th, 2020, letter from Eddie Francis. Item 7.24, June the 30th, 2020, response to email and letter from Mary and Greg Doyle. Item 7.25, June the 30th, 2020, response to email from Jean-Paul Patnaud. Item 7.26, June 30th, 2020, email from Joseph and Samantha Buklinski. Item 7.27, June the 30th, 2020, email from Jenny Buklinski. Item 7.28, June the 30th, 2020, email from Nicholas and Ria Buklinski. Item 7.29, July the 1st, 2020, email from Kevin Murphy. Item 7.30, July the 1st, email and letter from Peter Buklinski. Item 7.31, July the 20th, 2020, email from Katie and Benedict Buklinski. Item 7.32, July the 1st, email from Shirley Rady. Item 7.33, July the 1st, 2020, email from Kevin Murphy. Item 7.34, July the 2nd, email and letter from David and Pat Henstock. Item 7.35, July the 2nd, 2020, email from Janelle Pastway, request for Ray Pastway to attend electronic meeting. Item 7.36, July the 2nd, 2020, email from Cheryl Stanley. Item 7.37, July the 2nd, email from Maureen McMillan. Item 7.38, July the 2nd, letter from Reverend John Lacey. Item 7.39, July the 2nd, 2020, email from Diane and John Henry Weston. Item 7.40, July the 2nd, 2020, email from David Dotwright. Item 7.41, July the 2nd, time stamp 1:24 p.m., email from Marlon McKenzie. Item 7.42, July 2nd, 2020, date stamp 1:28 p.m., email from Marlon McKenzie. 7.43, July the 2nd, email from Michelle Bojack. Item 7.44, July the 2nd, 2020, email from Paulette Marquette. Item 7.45, July the 2nd, 2020, email and letter from Ray Pastway. Item 7.46, July the 2nd, email from Peter Buklinski. Item 7.47, July the 2nd, 2020, email from Ray Pastway. Item 7.48, July the 2nd, 2020, email and letter from Stephanie Park and Jonathan Pratt. Item 7.49, July the 2nd, email and letter from Mara J. Lennon. Item 7.50, July the 2nd, 2020, email from Michelle Murkowski. Item 7.51, July the 2nd, 2020, email from Mervyn Murkowski. Item 7.52, July the 2nd, 2020, email from Stephanie Park. Item 7.53, July the 2nd, 2020, email from Lynn Yantha. Item 7.54, July the 2nd, 2020, email from Kristen Hammond. Item 7.55, July the 2nd, 2020, email response to Mayor Love, John and Lynn Yantha. Item 7.56, July the 2nd, 2020, email from David Henstock, request to attend electronic meeting. And this is where their new additions were added. Item 7.57, July the 6th, 2020, email from Marlon McKenzie, just confirming that item 7.42 above was sent in error. Item 7.58, July the 8th, 2020, email from Peter Buklinski and response, requesting to be added as an attendee at the public meeting. Item 7.9, July the 6th, 2020, email from Kevin Murphy and response. The request was there was a date correction to item 7.33 and item 7.60, July the 6th, 2020, 2020, email from Tony and Diane Harrison from Harrison Construction. And those were all the emails and responses that I received. Back to you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. That's quite a list of correspondence. So at this point in the meeting, I'm going to ask if there are any oral or written presentations by those in attendance. I know there are a number of you who are going to want to speak to this, but I'd just like to start with the applicant, and that's Mr. Bradley, if you wanted to speak to this, and then I will proceed to call for other members of the public to speak. But if I could start with Mr. Bradley, who is the applicant. And you'll need to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Mayor Love and councillors. I'd like to defer my comments to Brian Whitehead, who has been retained as our independent planning expert. And I'm just going to pass the floor over to him to make remarks on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whitehead.
Thank you, Mayor Love, members of council, staff. In addition to being joined by Mr. Bradley, we're also joined today by the two proponents. One is Maddie Pasuti, who was mentioned earlier. The second is Jamil Barmal. I hope I got your last name correct. So there's and Jamil may actually have some comments to follow mine as well. What I'd like to do is just explain the background and purpose of my presentation, which will be about 5 minutes or maybe 6 minutes. Provide some general comments between provincial requirements and municipal planning requirements, and provide an overview of my planning review. What I've done is I've been brought in because I'm a registered professional planner, and my code of conduct requires me to provide independent planning advice. So that's what I've done. I've conducted a planning review of this application. I've looked at the provincial policy statement, county official plan, your zoning bylaw. I've looked at the application and the draft zoning bylaw amendment. I've looked at the agency comments that have been submitted to date. Some, but not all of the public comments, but enough of the public comments to get a general sense of the concerns in the community. And also the county planning report, which I think is a key piece of evidence. Wally Simpson has provided various maps and plans of the property for us as well. So but before I get into my review of the planning aspects of this application, I just want to mention that there's quite a lot of provincial regulation associated with the approval of a retail outlet for cannabis, and I think there needs to be an important distinction made between that level of review and the review of the planning merits of the application with the applications before council. And in terms of provincial requirements, and council may already be aware of this, but there's the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. There's the Cannabis Licensing Act of 2018, and which is also implemented by Ontario Regulation 468. And in terms of legislation, Section 42.2 of the Cannabis License Act says that the authority to pass a bylaw under Section 34, 38, and 41 of the Planning Act. 34 is zoning, which we're dealing with today. 38 is also zoning, I think, in a temporary use arrangement. And 41 is site plan control, which is one of the tools that the county is recommending for this property. So the municipality doesn't, in their exercise of the authority under the Planning Act for those sections of the Act, does not include authority to pass a bylaw that has the effect of distinguishing between the use of land, a building and structure that includes the sale of cannabis, and the use of land, building, or structure that does not include the sale of cannabis. So essentially what that means is you can control the use of the land in terms of a retail use, like any other retail use in your municipality. But the actual operation of a cannabis facility itself is a provincial responsibility and provincial legislation under the regulations and legislation. And as mentioned in the county report, according to the, the AGCO, the Alcohol Gaming Commission of Ontario, the regulations define the public interest related to public health and safety and restricting access to youth and illicit activities. So that's the responsibility of the provincial legislation. And the other point is that there are some very strict requirements in place for advertising, product visibility of product, and access to product that is implemented through that legislation. And those obligations the proponent will be required to follow. The township is, as you know, has opted to allow the sale of cannabis in your municipality, and that therefore it's treated as a retail use like any other retail use in your community, and it's a permitted use in any highway commercial or general commercial zone that you have, or it's not general commercial, it's just commercial in your municipality. So in this case, in my review of the planning aspects of the application, there is no reference to cannabis retail in the provincial policy statement or the County of Brantford official plan, none at all. There's a reference to cannabis production, and there's off-site impacts associated with that have to be addressed on a site-specific basis, but not the retail end of it. And that's because it's covered under policies of the plan that relate to commercial uses. And the property is designated rural under the official plan that existed at the time the application was filed. And commercial is a permitted use under the policies of the plan. So under the commercial policies, all new uses require a zoning bylaw amendment. And the commercial policies say that site plan controls it's in a site plan control area. And I'll talk to that a little bit more later. And then also under the commercial policies for rural, the general development policies apply, where that triggers a need for looking at under the general policies, there's policies for land use compatibility for industrial and commercial development. Matters such as vehicle parking and maneuvering, off-street parking and loading, buffering with adjacent residential land use or other potentially incompatible land uses to commercial. Commercial activities are required to look at servicing options. Any use that's greater than 4,500 liters a day automatically triggers a hydrogeological study. And under the servicing policies of the plan, there is a criteria that says hydrogeology study is required for industrial commercial uses. And I'll speak to more of that in a minute. And of course, as the municipality is well aware, with the Madawaska River, there are floodplain policies that have to be complied with. So those are the main policy issues related to this site and this proposed use. In terms of site plan controls, this is a county recommendation and I agree with it. Really, a lot of the concerns that have been raised in the correspondence that are planning related do address concerns about parking, off-street parking, parking on laneway, parking on the highway, which I believe now is a county road. And there are concerns about land use compatibility and buffering. These are items that can be addressed through site plan control. There would have to be, and flood proofing as well. So the applicant would be required to prepare a detailed site plan showing where the parking would be, how the access would be. This is an opportunity for council to actually improve an existing situation through the use of site plan control. And hydrogeology, just a clarification on the application. There was reference to a composting toilet. Evidently, there is an existing septic system and well on the property that serves the Bent Anchor restaurant facility. There is no composting toilet proposed. In fact, there's no septic or well usage proposed for this retail outlet. And there was some question about whether, from the client, why should we do it? But in a policy context, well, there's two reasons. One, policy says you should do it. So it's ticking the box in that respect. But the other reason is because it's permitting a retail use. So it's a cannabis facility today. It could be another retail use in the future that could require a septic system. So we're recommending to the client that they proceed with that study. Access to the county road is over a private right-of-way. This is a right-of-way that's been existing, I'm given to understand, for some time. There is a provision in your bylaw that's been pointed out by at least one member of the public that does say that access parking areas for commercial and industrial uses shall not pass through a residential zone. In this case, I'd submit that this existing arrangement for private access to Vent Anchor has been established actually predates your zoning bylaw. Your zoning bylaw actually recognizes the existing commercial use, tourist commercial use of the property. So in that context, my position would be that it's an existing situation and it's a legal non-conforming in accordance with another provision of your bylaw that says nothing in this bylaw shall prevent the use of any land for any purpose prohibited by the bylaw if such land was used for that purpose on the date it was passed. So in this case, the access to this commercial use was existing prior to your zoning bylaw. Also, in addition to that, there were comments submitted from the Engineering and Public Works Department from the county of Renfrew was indicating that they had no comments or concerns regarding this application. But if there's a concern about the level of service of the access road to the county, there's an opportunity to mitigate that through site plan control. On the floodplain side of things, there is information provided to us from Mr. Wally Simpson, indicating that there was elevations taken for the footings of the existing Vent Anchor building that are higher than the flood. They comply with the floodplain requirements, and I haven't done a site visit, yet. But I am told by Mr. Simpson that the elevation of the property increases toward the access road to the property, to the back of the property. So in conclusion, my suggestion or my request is that council consider this application on its planning merits as a retail use in accordance with any other retail use that you would assess in your municipality. I would support the conclusions and recommendations of the county planning department, which provides planning advice to the municipality on a regular basis and with this file. And subject to completion of these, the site plan controls, the hydrogeology and implementation of floodplain requirements, I would consider this proposal to be good planning. That's my verbal planning report to council. I'm available to answer any questions and defer to Jamil Barmel if you'd like to add anything on top of that.
Okay, so normally we go through this process of hearing from the applicant and the public specifically before council gets into questions that they may have about the application or any discussion of the application. So does council wish to do questions at this point in regards to Mr. Whitehead? Is that what you would like to do, or would you prefer to hold off, hear from everyone, and then ask questions and have discussion? A specific question, Councillor Bromwich.
Yeah, I'd really like to hear from other people here and get a full picture on it. I believe we need more information, a lot more. I hope we don't get too tied up with the minutiae on this and the extended hopes and dreams of the cannabis shop being open. I think there's some immediate issues we have to deal with on this application that we should concentrate on, and I don't think we'll get a complete picture unless we hear from all the people involved. So thank you.
So if no other member of council has a concern, I'd like to continue to proceed through the applicant's input, verbal input at this point, and then the public's verbal input at this point. And then we will, as usual, go on to our questions. Councillor Poplinsky, did you have a concern with that?
Yeah, no, I have no concern about moving it forward. I do have concerns about this whole process. And I would like to deal with it further into the meeting, if I may.
Yes.
Certainly after we hear the other folks that will be joining us today. Perhaps some of the questions will be answered, but I would like to make sure that we do have a period of time that we can express our concerns and so on.
Absolutely. That would be.
I would appreciate that very much.
Okay, that would be part 9 of the agenda, questions and discussion by council. So we will continue to follow this agenda. And I guess at this point, I'll ask if either of the property owners wanted to speak. And yes, Mr. Barmal?
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
I just wanted to give you a little bit of context of who we are and what we've been doing in the Bentanker and what we're hoping to do. Maddie, my business partner, myself, took ownership of the Bentanker in 2019. I think that even everybody here in this public attendance would agree that we rehabilitated a landmark, that we created a place that was much more in tune and in harmony with the neighborhood. And we received from many people in the community and attendance appreciative of how we reformed the Bentanker. I also wanted to point out that we are providing a large amount of jobs. I think we are the largest hospitality employer in Combermere. We also provide a lot of jobs to younger adults, people just beginning of their career. As far as this retail application, we wished with great effort to work with the community. In fact, that we communed a meeting hoping to allow the neighborhood and the participants of Combermere to have input far and greater than what is required by either municipal laws or provincial laws. We wanted to work with the community. Unfortunately, we were faced with an ultimatum of, you have to stop or else. At this point, I just want to stress the idea that what we're applying for under the laws is an impartial review of a retail application. The application of the retail, what we're actually using it for, like Brian pointed out, is regulated by the provincial laws. What we are looking at is applying for a retail license, which is a very normal and pedestrian request given our present zoning. What we're asking for is a consideration by the council and by the mayor that they look at this as a retail application, regardless of what that retail application is for. Those security concerns are, again, like Brian pointed out, the legislative responsibility of the provincial government. Having said that, we will continue to work with our neighborhood, and we would still love to have open lines of communication with our immediate neighbors and Combermere in general. I am, again, expressing that we will comply with all bylaws. We will comply with all AGC laws, and a reminder that the township had opted in. We did not or feel responsible for fighting a legacy battle about the merits or the dangers of cannabis. We feel that that discussion should have been and is the responsibility of the opt-in recourse. And so we would love to, under the laws of Ontario and the laws of the bylaw, say retail is retail, and we're hoping that the council and the mayor will comply with the impartial and objective application process, and that impartial and objective applications of the law is what is the fabric which allows for diverse views to join together as one community. And that's what we would like. We would like this diverse views to be joined together with open communication into one community.
Okay, thank you. Did Mr. Suti want to speak to this as well, or are you okay with what Mr. Barmel has said?
We had these discussions with Jamil lots of times. We're all on the same page. Just wanted to add that I have been investing in the community right out of university since 2006. I bought the Beaver Lake Motel, turned it into Hush Lodge, sold it, and it's a business that operates and makes our community better. Bent Anchor was for sale for 5 years. I always saw opportunity in it. We made a commitment, and you see what it has become today. And I want to further invest into this wonderful community that me and my family now call home.
Okay, thank you. So we've heard from the owners and the applicant and from Mr. Whitehead. Now, I know there are other members of the public in attendance here who would like to speak to this. So could I ask you to raise your hands? Okay, I'll start with Stephanie Park and Jonathan Pratt. They are an adjacent property owner and the owner of the right-of-way.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us today. And I guess everybody received a pretty huge package of letters and comments from the public on this. And really, it comes down for us being the immediate adjacent neighbors being the ones who will be most impacted by any potential future development over in our neighborhood. So as Mr. Whitehead pointed out in his presentation, he suggested that this might in fact be good planning without actually having been to the site or visited the community. And just because a land use existed previous to the bylaw being passed in 2006 doesn't necessarily mean that that was good planning or good use at that time. And so we are sort of at this point dealing with the situation as it exists. I recognize that. And if there are ways to make that better, and through collaboration with our neighbors, with Maddie and Jamil over the past couple of years, we have attempted to address a number of these issues. But really it's remedial issues stemming from what potentially was poor planning to begin with. So if there is any way at this point that council can look at the current existing conditions and ways to help make that better for the residents, that really is, I think, still a valid argument against this necessarily being considered good planning. And I think that as Jamil recognized, the cannabis issue is almost besides the point at this point, being legal in Canada. But we would also submit potentially that cannabis or not, if it was purely a retail expanded use of the property, we would experience a lot of the same impacts to our peace and safe enjoyment of our property, whether it was a retail outlet for sale of any other type of commercial good, as it might be for cannabis. So we outlined in our letter, I think pretty clearly, some of those other points that have been brought up by Mr. Whitehead and his, and this is the first I'm hearing about his assessment of the situation. And also in the package that we received with the agenda for today, further in the recommendations from the County of Renfrew Planning Department, it was suggesting along the same things that we need to consider the site plan and the conforming to the local bylaws, as well as the studies and the proximity to nearby residents, as well as they have questions around the approval of use of the access road for this purpose. So without actually reading all the points from our letter, or also going through step by step a lot of those other bylaws which have already been mentioned, I would like to submit that we do have some real concerns around the increase or changed use, proposed use, as it relates to our access road and our continued safe enjoyment of our property.
Okay, thank you. And you did.
If I might suggest Stephanie might have something to add as well.
Oh, okay. Yes, please. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, like we have been, I think, really good neighbors. We've lived in the Madawaska Valley for a long time, but we've bought our first house in 2012. And we knew that we bought it and the Bentanker was beside us. And we have enjoyed meals over there, but we've also had to deal with a lot of negative consequences throughout the years. The new owners have helped with a couple of those. However, we don't know what it's going to look like in the future if they do sell it or if they change their ideas. So allowing this additional use is going to severely impact us as residential landowners. And it does contravene two of the bylaws currently. And we haven't also seen a site plan saying that, I know the owners have said that they will follow the zoning bylaws, but we haven't seen a site plan that actually works. We're not sure, given the floodplain, as well as given all the extra additional requirements that they would need in terms of zoning, setbacks from adjacent residential properties, if it would actually work. So I'm not sure if the council has received a site plan that does mention those floodplain zones and the setbacks as well.
Okay, so council in their package has the sketch, but it's not a site plan, it is a sketch.
Yeah, it's a sketch. And so I'm asking council to really ask for that, because the Renfrew asked for it too in their zoning recommendations before making a decision. And cannabis or no cannabis, increased traffic that goes onto Highway 62 is a problem. We have the curved bridge there, and there is not enough parking. So although we have less parking that is happening in our laneway, now parking is actually happening on the highway, and it's blocking people's visual sight going in and out of the Bentanker onto our roadway, and it's becoming a problem for traffic. And we do worry about the safety of the residents in our community.
And I guess maybe one final point, as Mr. Whitehead pointed out, that access road is over our privately owned, residentially zoned property. That's a fact that's not commonly known in the community, that most people assume that access from Highway 60 is the purview of the Bentanker and as their commercial access. And really our property starts right at the edge of the ATV and snowmobile trail and includes the entire stretch of that laneway up to the point where you actually turn in onto the Bentanker's property.
The other thing I want to mention is that easement was actually created in 1936 with the sole purpose of allowing the passways access to the highway. It was not, there's no language mentioning access to the other Bentanker property at that time. So that would be, by allowing this residential zone, that would be changing what the easement has historically been used as, and it would increase traffic on that laneway.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'll move on to Mr. Pastway. I noticed you had your hand up. Ray, we need you to unmute yourself.
Okay, are we good?
We're good now.
Okay. Yes, thank you. And as you know, I'm neighbors with both the Jonathan and Stephanie and the Bentanker, and lived there, as my letter has said, for all my life. And we've got my family and I have certainly a lot of concern, moving forward. So much of it has been already in print. We We know about the visible aspects of the location. If it's further for policing, you know, it's my concern. It's a little lower, it's a little hidden kind of area. Parking has always been a real issue, which I must say that Jamil and Matt have worked well to try and combat that by more signage, whatever. But it's unfortunate that a lot of our people that come to the area just can't seem to read. I don't know what it is. I guess it's move away from the city, come to the country, and there's no laws. It's just kind of like do what we want to do. So for the last number of years, we've had to, you know, close our gate for trespass, moving through my personal property, and it makes a loop through to my daughter's property and then back out again onto the Palmer Road. And you know, we've had this discussion before. It's a good area to zip through and miss that ride check or whatever down at the Palmer Highway and Highway 62. And so we, you know, I don't want to, you know, get lawyers involved and all the other and about all of this, but I did get some tidbits that if this bylaw change affects me and my family personally and my property, then we certainly have the rights to object, and council has to certainly pay attention. And I think that right now, with what I see at the Bent Anchor and the changes they've made, it's such a beautiful family-run little restaurant business, and I can't understand why, you know, the change to cannabis is such a big part of their plan. I know that's it's a plan to expand and you know, move forward in the province and sell other places. So it's an expensive move, and I really am concerned that it's not going to be the 2 months of the year, but certainly could be year round. And if it is, now I've got to leave my gate closed most of the year or be concerned about who's going through or whatever. Even with a gate closed, you know, you get pushing a bike and pedaling right past your house and out onto Palmer Road. And, you know, it's very frustrating to have that. So with the increase of more into the area, into the store area or restaurant area, I've got great concerns that I'm just going to have more traffic in trespassing, let alone it be cannabis or whatever it is. We've got some major concerns there, and we know that, you know, policing costs is definitely going to increase in our community as we move forward with that, and everybody pays a portion of that for sure. And you know, I just think that as the expansion has had and it grows, I know Matt and Jamil, you said you want to live in the area and whatever, and it's all good thought, but I think that, you know, I'm afraid that the offer will come because your investment is so great that the day will come and the offer will be good. And it really scares me as to who may, you know, come next or who be part of this project the next time around. And so I'm really concerned about our property, the safety of my family on the property here, and what we have to put up with for the advancement of changing this bylaw. So Mayor, those are my key points, and I have more in the, and I was really hoping that maybe if councilors hadn't a full visual view of my property, that they would have stopped by and have a look and see what we're speaking about there for sure. Thank you, Mayor Love.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pastway. Next, I have Mr. Henstock.
Morning, Mayor Love. Thank you, members of council. I think that Councillor Bromwich may have kind of already spoken to the address that I want to bring forth. I would really like to see an effort to restore harmony in our village. So I don't know whether it's my right to call for a motion or to propose a motion. But what I'd like to see today as a conclusion to this meeting is a deferral of any decision. I think if the following 3 points, and I'll be brief, but if the following three points could be pursued under council's exercising due diligence before a final decision, then I think at least you will be seen to be in some effort to restore harmony. So my first point is that, and this has been spoken to, and I very much enjoyed Mr. Whitehead's presentation. Predictable, but extremely thorough. And if anyone's researched, I don't think there's any issues that he presented that we weren't expecting. I believe point number one, there has to be a separate entrance to this commercial operation. And even if, you know, there are no bylaws, no deeded access, nothing, it's just common sense. You know, the use of this current entrance, which impacts the two residents that have already spoken, just makes no sense at all. So as an initiative, there has to be a review for a separate entrance to be constructed. Point number two, and this is, I believe, an omission. There may be extenuating circumstances as to why the OPP were not present on today's agenda. But I heard that Sue mentioned that they'd been informed about the potential of a social media campaign, but I don't know for sure whether they were invited to this meeting, which I believe is an omission. So I think it's, as point number two, part of due diligence, it's incumbent on council to both establish an opinion from the OPP, from the Killaloe detachment, and furthermore, to put that on public record. Because you are not, as Brian Whitehead said, responsible for implementing provincial or federal law, but you are certainly responsible for supporting enforcement and not to impede the activities of those agents that are enforcing the law. So that's why I need that to happen. And finally, point three, and I will speak to Jamil and to Matty. You know, I was at the meeting, I documented what I took away from that meeting, and I shared that with Jamil on email. I didn't hear that anything that I put was contrary to his understanding. It wasn't a great meeting in the sense that there was a well-established revolt to the proposal of cannabis. The application is indeed for the establishment of retail, and I respect that, and I know that the issuing of a license for retail cannabis will be someone else's problem. What I would like to see, again, under due diligence, is that council establish a much better and informed understanding of what these two owners are proposing. I'm going to be polite, I'm not going to criticize the individuals, but let's say this, there's much contradiction. We were told at the meeting, and I documented this, and council have been shared on that document. So we came away from the meeting knowing full well what was proposed, but in the coming, in the past days, other things have come forth, and it's clear that diversification is an absolute imperative for these two guys. But in contradiction, it doesn't have to generate a means of income, according to what information I received. Again, contradiction. We've now seen something that says cannabis tourism is in the scope. Well, my understanding of that, and council may have a different opinion, my understanding is that that involves consuming cannabis at the establishment, whereas we were told there's absolutely no chance that cannabis will be consumed on site. So please, just take a moment, pause this whole decision-making process, and let's continue, as Jamil has asked, for an open dialogue where we fully understand, and that can be in the context of council involvement, let's fully understand what it is that this business is aiming to do. The parking issue isn't related solely to the immediate vicinity. We are on Mill Street. We have people parking on the Sunset Beach car park. Those people park there, they walk down to the Bent Anchor. And obviously in the bad old days, with the late alcohol sales, those people would return completely intoxicated and carry out merry howl for hours in the early hours. Now, I've indicated in my submission that the two guys have turned this around. Kudos to you for that. There's no guarantee that this thing will revert, in the future. So please, municipal authority, you're charged to take action to prevent all nuisance. Okay, you may not be responsible for implementing the federal provincial laws, but you certainly are there to prevent all nuisance. So your job's not done. You have to defer a decision today. You have to undertake the 3 points that I've outlined, and then we can regather to continue this discussion. I thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Henstock. Council has heard your input. I guess at this point, I will move on to the next individual. I see Mr. Beklinski.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor Love and town councilors, for this meeting and for hearing our concerns. My name is Peter Beklinski, and I've grown up in this area right close to Combermere, just down Highway 62 outside of Combermere. And I have chosen to return to this area and raise my family. When I received news that there was going to be rezoning application for the Bent Anchor so that they could move forward with a cannabis shop, I must admit that I was dismayed to hear that news. And in talking to various people around the village, there was a lot of concern about what this would do to our community. Many concerns were brought forward about this being a residential community where people are raising their families. There's a lot of young families in the area. And there was a lot of concern about what kind of clientele this would bring into our small town, and even potential negative consequences that would come into our town because of the opening of this shop if the application is approved. So there was a meeting that was called last week, and a number of local members of the village, which included parents, grandparents, a lot of neighbors, local neighbors, as well as just different community leaders, were at this meeting. And I would say that the vast majority, but one, were basically voicing concerns about this coming into our community. One father referenced studies about the increase of crime where cannabis dispensaries are brought in. If I could just read from one study that was done by Laureen Hughes, PhD, Associate Professor in the School of Public Affairs at the University of Colorado, Denver. This is what she found in her study. Now, remember, Denver in the United States did legalize cannabis, and there were many dispensaries opening up in various places. This is what they found as a consequence. Quote, "We found that neighborhoods with one or more medical or recreational dispensary saw increased crime rates that were between 26 and 1,452% higher than in neighborhoods without any commercial marijuana activity." It's information like this that concerns the residents of Combermere. We don't want to see increased crime rates in our village. There were many concerns raised from various residents about the previous owners of the Bent Anchor and the clientele that they had attracted, and a lot of hooliganism that was resultant of that. One community just across the river mentioned how their bikes were stolen. There was other neighbors mentioning about people coming onto their property, trespassing, being intoxicated and destroying property. There are fears that this type of thing will happen if this shop is opened in our residential family-friendly village. And a lot of people are quite concerned about this. There were other people who brought up concerns about the personal effects that marijuana has had on either their children or people they know. And they don't want to see a trickle-down effect of when a dispensary is available in the local area. They don't want to see a trickle-down effect happening where more people in the area then are using it, and potentially even that trickling down to children or youths, young people, who because of this dispensary would have streams by which they could access this product. One mother related how her son's life was destroyed through marijuana. It was a gateway drug that led to other substance abuse. And she was quite concerned about other young people in the area finding a pathway to that substance, marijuana, because of it just being available. Now, obviously, the owners will not be selling to minors. All of that will be regulated. But the fact that the dispensary is there, it's going to be sold to other people who can then pass it on to other people in the area. And thus we would see a potential increase of the use of this drug in our village. So that was one concern that was brought up during this meeting. There was during this meeting that took place last Tuesday, there was talk about local parents and residents basically telling the owners of the Bent Anchor that they no way want this cannabis dispensary opened on this premise. And there was talk about a boycott of the Bent Anchor if they were to proceed with their plans. And there was talk about a 72-hour deferral of the launch of the boycott, where the owners would decide what they were going to do, because the community at that meeting was pretty clear. And there was about 24 of community members. I was there myself, and the outrage, I would say, was so visceral. People were saying, we don't want this in our community. We don't want you to bring this here. And the owners were given 72 hours to decide whether they were going to go ahead with their application or not. And if they didn't, then local residents would be boycotting the Bent Anchor. That's how seriously they were perceiving this as a threat. And after 72 hours, after hearing the concerns of the local community, which included neighbors, residents of Combermere, as well as parents with families and grandparents, they decided that they would still go ahead with their application after hearing all of these concerns, after being told about the studies about the increased rates of crime. They still decided to go ahead with their application. So they say they want to work with the community and they respect the local community, but they utterly did not respect the concerns that were raised that night. And despite the local community saying, we don't want this, the local community that was present at that meeting, they still decided to press ahead with their application. And I think, I just wonder how honest they're being in wanting to work with the local community when, despite the concerns that were raised, they still decided to go ahead with their application. So I thank you for listening to me, and I just want you to know that a lot of local residents are very concerned. The letters that you all received, that Silas was reading out all the different names, I actually went through and read all those letters. There were 44 people who wrote voicing concerns, basically saying, we don't want this in our small residential community. This is not something we want on our streets, on our waterways. This is not something we want our children or grandchildren exposed to. There was only a small handful of letters of people who actually were in favor of this. So it works out to 90% of the letters were against this. And those were all coming from local residents of Combermere, some of them spiritual leaders, some of them community leaders, grandparents, parents, who basically were saying, this is not something we want in our community. So I ask you to please read those letters. Let these people speak to you. They have important points to make. One point that I thought was quite good was Combermere lacks a lot of services. We don't even have essential services like a gas station. We have to drive to Barry's Bay if we want to fill up our tanks with gas. It would be great to invest in Combermere some essential services that people can all get behind. We used to have a doctor's office right in Combermere. We've lost that. Let's bring some services into Combermere that we can all get behind and that will benefit the entire community. Whereas this, I think, will just divide the community, and it has already divided the community. And in the end, I think it will be a bad decision to allow this cannabis dispensary to come into our town. So please, town councilors, if you can read those letters, they spell it out better than I ever could about why the residents, many residents of Combermere don't want this. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beklinski. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to council on this planning application? Now, Mr.
Yes, I would.
Okay, Mr. Teslick, we happen to not be able to see you, but I will give the floor to you and we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I did have my hand raised. That maybe it got unraised.
No, I can't see you. I can't see. Your video is off.
Okay.
Double check if your video can be turned on before you start.
It cannot.
Okay, so we can hear you. We just can't see you.
Okay, my name is David Tesluck. I live approximately 2 kilometers downriver from the Bent Anchor Bar and Grill and have lived there for the last 9 years. Since the current owners of the Bent Anchor Bar and Grill took over its management, they have improved the products, services, and music available to our community. Although I can sometimes still hear the entertainment at my home on some nights, it is clear that they have significantly addressed the hours and volume of the late night entertainment. Our community benefits from having the Bent Anchor in our neighborhood, and the owners should be thanked for being here. Thank you, Bent Anchor. 2 of Town Council's criteria in considering a zoning amendment are: 1, the compatibility with adjacent uses of land, and 2, adequacy of vehicular access. Also important is compatibility with Combermere's existing retail district centered around the former Valley Market. The existing retail district continues to struggle, despite that it has superior street lighting and vehicle access than when compared to the subject proposed site. Unfortunately, the Bent Anchor's application should fail for the following 3 reasons. Vehicular access is inadequate for the proposed retail use. That was number 1. Number 2, the proposed retail use fails to be compatible with existing adjacent land uses. And 3, Combermere's existing retail zone should not be further suppressed by increasing retail to new areas, especially before expanding local services such as garbage collection and street lighting. Thank you for listening to me. I am willing to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, has everyone who wanted to speak spoken? Is there anyone I've missed that has not had an opportunity to speak from the members of the public? Give me a minute because I have to check you all on my screen. I would also then, I see no one else who wants to speak. I did want to offer the applicants an opportunity to respond to some of the public's concerns that you have heard. If you would like to, Mr. Barmal, would you like to respond, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Again, I appreciate everybody's opinions, and I would further just like to highlight that what we're doing is applying for a retail license. The consideration of what that retail license is not what the bylaw meeting committee should be about. Retail is retail, and what we're doing is asking for something which is very, very usual. It's not an unusual request. As far as the concerns with parking and separate entrances, again, we're willing to work with the community in all aspects of that planning. And part of the reason that the site plan has not been submitted is that we wanted to give people the opportunity to have input into exactly how and where our retail location is placed. I would like to again say that what we're asking the council to do is do an objective and impartial review according to the laws and the precedents set. I know that cannabis is a hot topic, a hot button topic here, but what the retail outlet is being used for is not the question put before you. The question put before you is, given the historical use and the present use, is a retail amendment something that's unusual? And we argue that it is not. And you can see that we are trying to create an economic opportunity here in Combermere. As far as suppressing other areas, questions of garbage collections, reinvigorating the downtown core of Combermere, all for it. Think that's a great idea. We're not asking for any sort of public funds. We're not asking for any sort of public assistance in any way. This would be a business matter conducted by us and fully funded by us. And we're simply asking for the council to review what is, by all other aspects, a very pedestrian request. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to ask one more time, was there anyone else who wanted to speak to this application? Mr. Pasuti. Pasuti, sorry.
Yeah, Suti, it's okay. It's
I'm
the
getting your
Polish.
name wrong every time. I apologize.
It's all right. So I know that there was a lot of parking issues brought up, but this spring we took out about 30 trees. We made 12 additional automobile parking spots and 10 additional designated motorcycle parking spots. You know, I heard here comments of vehicles parking out on Mill Street, vehicles parking out on the highway. These are all issues that we, along with the neighbors, identified a year ago. And I believe all of these issues have been corrected this season. I have been watching the laneway and the highway and the way parking flow has been working in our facility for 3 weeks now. And I have, we have spoken with Pratt and with Ray, and to my knowledge, there was not a concern raised this year of vehicles parking along the highway or in the laneway or on Mill Street. So I believe we have corrected that issue, and we will continue to keep on working with our immediate neighbors to resolve any other future issues that will arise. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. So if there's, yes, Mr. Pratt.
Hi, thank you. So I'd like to address some of those points that were made, because I think there's been some very productive discussion and some very good and interesting points that have been raised for council's consideration at this time. Maybe along some of those concerns that were just addressed, I would suggest that as we have recognized the subject property is in a floodplain zone of the Madawaska River and a potentially environmentally sensitive area, that there may have been some consideration taken to the removal of vegetation from that location, which is potentially sustaining and stabilizing the ground on that site, and what impact further development in terms of expanded parking might have on that site, and by association, the natural environment of the Madawaska River at that location. And while Jamil mentioned that this may seem like a relatively pedestrian request to have this passed as a simple retail expansion, I might also refer council back to your last strategic plan, which stated that adding more retail and restaurants was not viewed as a viable means of improving the local economy. And as one of the other speakers did mention, there may be some existing commercial real estate that is properly zoned and in a arguably better location that would be well suited to this type of retail endeavor without further expanding into another zone, impacting the surrounding residents in that way.
Okay.
Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. If there's nothing further, I'd like, oh, sorry, Mr. Pastway.
just one quick comment there to Matty, and Matty, I appreciate he's done a lot to help prevent some of the parking that's been in the laneway for sure. And he's asked me on different occasions, you know, what do you think and whatever. And again, I go back, it's too bad that no matter what Matty really does, he can't really stop those cars from going through our driveway and through. It's because when they pull in, and if they do see a parking lot that's nearly full, well, let's just go a little further. So they come into the yard, turn around, back out. My grandkids are there playing around all the time because that's what they do. So and Matty, you know, he did offer we could put in that automatic gate that would work and everything. And it's just like, this is just not Commermere to have a gated property, you know, here. But you know, an automatic one anyway, I just literally just close what I do have, you know, for now. And for the 2 months, you know, we've just had to do that. And I just don't see that going away. And I just see possibly it increasing, you know, with the store open there. So, but anyway, thanks for the effort, Matty. And we've had discussions about that. And you know my concerns for sure. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Mr. Henstock. And you need to unmute. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Love, councillors. Just as a final point and quick one, this isn't, Jamil, simply about a pedestrian matter of a retail application. What this is about is, and I think Mr. Whitehead spoke to this, is the land use compatibility. So if we look at the permitted uses under the existing bylaw, before we even consider the application for retail, there are, I believe, a number of permitted uses at the property, which in my view at least are incompatible with the fact that the site is located next to 2 residential properties. Rough camping as an example, that is allowed. I don't believe it's a compatible use. There's nothing to stop you introducing it. The property is vacated after hours. There's no one living at the property. So a concern I would have is that if you introduce that kind of activity under the existing permissions, then, you know, there are some security issues. You won't be there to do anything about that. I do believe, unlike Ray, I do believe a gate should be introduced, and that gate should be to the bent anchor so that the owners, when they vacate, can actually secure the property. And as I mentioned, that should be on a separate access from the Highway 62. But, and that's not simply for the public's interest, that's to protect your own interests. I believe a gate should be there and it should be secured when you leave the site. So thank you. And I just repeat my call for motion to defer the decision today. Thank you very much.
Okay, then one final comment from Mr. Pasuti.
Just want to let everybody know that brand new gate was installed at the entrance of Bent Anchor this spring. It is a steel gate and it is locked right after business hours for the whole night. Just want to make that clear.
Okay, thank you. All right, okay, and Stephanie, we will take you, I guess you would be the last person. I'd like to get to council's comments, questions, and discussions. Stephanie?
Sure. You know, and I think the 2 new owners have done a very good job mitigating a lot of the issues that we've had. It's not perfect, but I do want to press that if I had a business plan, I would choose a site that was zoned appropriately for my current business plan and my future business plan. And the new business plan is like really affecting the rights of the residents who abut this property. And I just want to, you know, we shouldn't have to abdicate our rights as residential owners because their business plan did not fit in with zoning. Thank you, council.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we've had our public input at this point, and I'm going to, okay, 1 second, I just lost my agenda. There we are. I'm going to ask, are there any questions or discussion from council? Members of council, okay, Councillor Bromwich. And
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Yeah, this is a kind of a touchy subject, and it's brought up a lot of conversations between pro and con. I just want to make one thing clear here, that if a retail store applies for a cannabis license and meets all the regulations of the provincial government and the AGCO and the Planning Act of Ontario, we are an opt-in municipality and we cannot refuse the license, or at least support for that license. So that shouldn't even be on the table today. We're discussing an application for rezoning. There's a couple of issues here that have come up that I'd like to refer to our final statement from Charles Cheeseman. And I think everybody's got a copy of this, page 17 through 21. And the suggestions that Charles Cheeseman, our planning department in Renfrew, suggests, I would like to see us follow his recommendations. And his recommendations are as follows, very simple at the very end. All the matters above, i.e. site plan, confirmation of the building location, complies with floodplain provisions of the bylaw, a hydrogeological study, proximity to nearby residences, approved access, should be considered by council in the review of the zoning bylaw amendment. Now, when we make decisions on rezoning, in a lot of cases, there's a floodplain issue brought up. People want to relocate a deck closer to the water. It doesn't really disturb the land. It's minor. We've allowed this to go through without an environmental study, without a hydrogeological study. But in this particular case, where there's so many people involved here, pros and cons, and it's a sticky issue, I would like to follow through with a very, very serious recommendation from our planning division in Renfrew and use their suggestions as our guidelines for our decision-making here. Our planning department has done a great amount of work on this. Thank you, Silas, for all the work you've done. We've read all the comments here, and I think the owners of the driveway here that's being used have been on a pretty good basis with the Ben Anchor. I've had experience as a motorcycle rider down to the Ben Anchor, and the parking situation down there at night when it's busy is tenuous at the best. And I've experienced trying to get parking down there. We've actually had to go right into the compound to park because there were so many cars. So it is an issue, but I think if we use a guideline such as Renfrew County Council has provided us for our decision making, I think we could probably meet all the requirements on both sides. Thank you.
okay, thank you, Councillor Bromwich. Councillor Wilmer.
Thank you, Mayor Love. I just, since this is a planning meeting, I'm going to keep my questions mainly to planning. I have a couple of questions for Brian. And I guess the first one being, we know we have commercial access over residential and it existed before our zoning bylaw. But as a planner, do you think it's a good situation to add another business to this, given that situation? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts on, if I may, Mayor Love.
Yes.
Obviously, it would be better situation if it was a public road. Considering the existing zoning on the site, the potential for additional development is also there already. My position or my thinking on this, and I've seen it before, is that there's an opportunity here for council to improve the situation. If there is a concern about the existing access and entrance and parking and land use compatibility, then site plan control is often used as a mechanism for improving an existing situation and mitigating neighborhood concerns about those types of issues. So to answer your question, it would be better for a public road, but given the circumstances, I think we can make this a better situation overall for the community.
And a couple of follow-ups then, Mayor Love. Brian, then I guess the site plan control, I know what it does, but what sort of changes for betterment do you see could happen from the site plan control?
Well, certainly the parking situation, Maddie has indicated that it has been increased. there's two, you look at the parking requirement for retail outlet. I think it's one space for every 2 or for every 50 square meters. Well, the building is only it's 800 square feet. It's like 76 square meters. There's only 2 parking spaces required, but there's an opportunity to provide more parking than that. And there's an opportunity to look at the Bent Anchor parking at the same time, and the entrance to it and the access to the county road can be considered as part of that process as well. And buffering is another important planning tool. If there's a need for retaining some trees or removing some trees, that can be considered as part of the process, which ones to remove, which ones to keep. Fencing, is there a need for fencing? That kind of thing. Signage, and whatever else that, and it could be circulated. Normally the site plan application would be circulated to municipal staff, and potentially the county staff as well, for a comment. So it's an application that would be filed just like, well, not just like a zone change, but it's an application process, and there's a review and circulation and input that can be provided. It's not a public process per se, because only the applicant and the municipality are the only groups that can negotiate it. But it certainly is, when it's related to the zoning, which is a public process, it is, as I've mentioned, a tool that can be used to try and mitigate concerns. So that's what it's a very common tool that we have.
And just one more follow-up,
Yes.
if I may. Would it be possible to create a separate entranceway or a roadway in? Is that a possibility, or?
Well, that would have to be a conversation with the county roads department. My experience with the roads department is that they have entrance standards. They have policies on standards, and the key one being, it depends on, they have different categories of county road depending on traffic volumes, and some county roads with low traffic volumes can get an entrance within a certain like a closer distance to an existing entrance. My thinking is that this was a provincial highway. There's probably a higher standard of county road, and the separation distance requirements would probably be, I don't know exactly what they are, but there would be separation distance requirements and involved. So it would definitely require some pre-consultation with the county to discuss that option.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I think there's some topographic challenges there too. There's a, as you approach the bridge, I think the grades go down, and there's quite an elevation difference between the road and the property that would have to be dealt with, and that could affect. And that unless there's something that could be done, like with a common entrance, like widening it somehow. That's something that I've seen done before. It's like you have a mutual entrance, but traffic for the Bent Anchor goes one way, and then the traffic for the remainder of the property goes another way. So there might be options we can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members of council that had questions or wanted to have a discussion? Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Love. And I'm going to keep my comments directed to 2 subjects, if I may. I think the other issues have been fairly well dealt with. I was just going to say that I find this very unfortunate that we have so much animosity right now over this particular issue. Having said that, I'd like to just draw your attention to, within the package, I found a map which I found rather, it's deceiving, because it shows the entrance. This is the one that was in the package, and I'm sure you all have those. There's no indication on there that there's quite a large curve. There's the curve on each end of this particular property. As you exit the village heading north into Barry's Bay, it's like almost like a half circle. And it's not depicted on the, it looks like a straight road here, including what's showing across the river itself. The bridge itself was the first curved bridge in Ontario, and I remember when it was constructed. It really does not show the obstruction that one would envision coming down the road or turning in or out. And I think it's incumbent that people familiarize themselves with that particular site if they haven't done so already. I find that very, very deceptive. I don't like. I think the other issue that I have is that I tried to see if there was any documentation which actually which would have been presented by the applicants, indicating that they do have a right to use that private driveway as a commercial entity. I believe it's incumbent on them to produce that, not for the township to do it. And I would like to see it before I would want to make any further decisions on this. And I would like to have anyone comment about that particular aspect as well.
Okay, Councillor Kuklinski, then are you asking that of the applicant, that they comment on their right to use the private driveway?
I would like to see their authorization for doing it, saying that it happened years ago. I don't think we can work on that basis. I certainly am not prepared to do that. Just because somebody's using someone else's driveway and now we're going to assume that everything was done. I assume it was done, but I would like to see some documentation. And it shouldn't be up to the township to have to produce that. It should be the applicant. And as I say, the safety, many of the people today have spoken very eloquently and in their letters regarding the safety of that particular site. And I haven't even talked about the water problem. That is right near the bridge. And as a former police officer, I'm very concerned about both areas, the road traffic, the boat traffic. And so I just hope that all of the comments that were made today will be given consideration. But the safety aspect is absolutely number one, I think needs to be dealt with. And it's just a very, very bad location. So that's what I've got to offer this morning.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bradley, you wanted to speak to the issue of use of the right-of-way, I believe.
Yes, Mayor Love, thank you. In the application materials to address the concern, there is a provision in the application materials that clearly says that the access to the property is a right-of-way. And so that's all that it's asked for. I can confirm to Mayor Love and council and all participants that this is a deeded registered right-of-way that's part of the legal description for the ownership of the Bantanker property that has been in place since roughly the mid-90s. So this is a legal registered right-of-way, and there's no concern or issue one way or the other about their use of it.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I am working solely with council, but I will see if Councillor Poplinski, would you like the owners of the right-of-way to speak to that?
If they so wish, that's fine. Mr. Bradley's
Okay.
already explained it from his point of view, but I would like to see something on the record where it
Okay.
allows them to do that.
Okay, thank you. So I will ask Mr. Pratt then if you wanted to speak to that right away.
Thank you. Yeah, Mayor, and I will keep it very brief, but I am a little bit concerned with Mr. Bradley's interpretation at this point, because we had conversations earlier regarding this easement, the potential legal status of this easement, and Mr. Bradley at that time informed me that he would be in a conflict of interest to both inform the applicants and provide us with legal counsel on that matter. So if he is in fact providing counsel with a legal recommendation or interpretation of the status of that easement at this time, I would suggest that that may be in conflict of interest. In my own research, I have found that although the easement does exist as an instrument within the property descriptions on each parcel register of the 3 adjoining properties, myself, Ray Passway, and the Bantanker, those instruments with language relating to the easement have been completely deleted from the parcel register of each of the 3 parcels of property. In an easement report that I had generated, it was considered highly unusual and in fact brought into question the legal existence of this easement right-of-way that had been completely deleted from each parcel register, but continued to remain in the property description. So my purpose today was not to, get involved in this sort of legal dispute, but certainly I do believe there are a lot of legal questions and potential implications that remain unanswered at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Poplinski, again, your comment was that you would like to see some documented evidence of the right-of-way being able to be used by this applicant. Does that sum it up?
Well, Mayor Love, with all due respect to Mr. Bradley, he's looking after the applicant. I think we should engage our own solicitor for some advice on it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bromwich.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I agree 100% with Councillor Poplinski on this issue. I think we need documentation to prove that this has a right of way for mutual use. From what I understand at this point in time, without Mr. Bradley's comments, is that this was a privately owned entrance to private owned land. And for approximately 18 years, they have allowed the use of that property or that access road for the Ben Anchor to operate. If there's any other legal declarations that this is a common use road, I would like to see it personally, okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Schulist.
Yes, true, Madam Mayor. Quite interesting conversation here. Yeah, I sort of agree too with the access road and so on, and I can sense good neighbors is what is probably the key here. Even going back to when there was an agreement for Bent Anchor, a new business back a while ago, is that there was also that good neighbor situation. And I'd like to know, how it ended up that they could get access, because the reason behind Bent Anchor was a bar, restaurant, and so on. Things are changing now. If you're changing something, what even the original people that give that easement I'd like to know if they would even dispute all this stuff that is happening here, because one of the things here is, I don't know if it's as much as the retail part of this rezoning, but it's what they're selling. And I think that's where the conversation is here. But I think they got that access to a business that is serving food and obviously entertainment and alcohol. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Schulist. I think, I guess I'm going to speak to this now as well. I certainly have a concern that the neighborhood is sort of holding ultimatums over this business, the Bent Anchor. If you do this, we're not going to come. I don't think that's the kind of community we are or should be. We are here to support our businesses. There's no doubt about that. And from what I have read through all the letters, which I have read in the package, and those that came late, it's very clear that the adjacent property owners have seen a significant improvement in dealing with and addressing the issues that have come up and been as a result of the Bent Anchor's activity under previous owners. I think, gentlemen, you have definitely worked hard to have good relations with your neighbors. I would really hate to see the Combermere community get out their pitchforks and be on this side or that of this issue. I don't think that's what we're dealing with here. The decision to make cannabis legal was a federal decision. There's no doubt about it. The decision to open up cannabis retail was in Ontario was a provincial decision to not continue with what had previously been proposed, which was that it would be sold through the LCBO and to open up this retail opportunity. When council was making the decision to opt in or opt out, there were a couple of things that were made very clear to us. One of them was that the property where a cannabis retail store would be must be zoned commercial. The only other criterion that was made very clear was that it must be located 150 meters from a school. Obviously, this property does meet the one criterion about the school, but it isn't zoned commercial. It's zoned tourist commercial exception 1. So that is a very specific zoning that does not allow retail. That's why we're here today. Council is being asked to change the zoning to allow for retail. And I'm going to stick solely with the retail argument and look at this from a retail perspective. If I do that, okay, maybe I will step one step back for a second, because this is a busy day. I got a lot on my plate. I do not want to miss this point. Council does not have the authority to say where cannabis retail will be, to say how many stores will be in Madawaska Valley. We have no input. We are not consulted on those issues. They are Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. They approve the locations. They approve the number of stores. They don't consult with the municipality. They have no obligation to consult with us when they do this. In this particular case, though, when we decided to opt in, it was very clear that that cannabis retail could be located in a commercial zone. This isn't a commercial zone. We're being asked to make a change. And it isn't even to make a change from tourist commercial to commercial, it's to add an exception for the allowance of retail. I think when we look at that as a council, now we have to consider not just the impact, what the owners would like to do, but also the impact on the adjacent property owners, because you are changing how you use your property. And it is potentially a significant change. To say that because of the footprint of the store, it only requires a couple of parking spaces. People who come to retail come in, get what they want, and leave. They're not there for lunch. They're not there for an extended period of time. The current business that is ongoing at the Bent Anchor is more of the kind of business where people come and they want to stay for a little while. So now you're asking to add a use to that where people are going to come, get what they wish to purchase and leave. This will increase the traffic flows significantly. And I think we have to consider what that's going to do in terms of the impacts, especially to your one neighbor, where this is their sole entrance to their property. They have no other choice. It's their property you're using, and it's their sole entrance. That makes those entrance issues super important. We also have to consider whether or not this retail is compatible with your tourist commercial designation. We know, I mean, you've been honest with us, and I certainly appreciate as owners that you've been upfront. You've been very clear and honest with the community about what your hope was for this retail. You're proposing retail for cannabis. When we look at one of the key things that you will have to demonstrate, should you apply for this license, if council was to grant you this amendment to your zoning, you're going to have to demonstrate how the location will or won't meet the purpose. Part of the purpose is keeping cannabis out of the hands of youth. I have a concern as mayor looking at this, that you've built a business that's family friendly, that has a playground area, that is promoting family use of your business. And now you're going to add to it retail that you have been honest and clear about is going to be for cannabis. It may not be a very compatible use for tourist commercial, as you are envisaging tourist commercial now. So that's a concern to me. It's going to be very difficult going forward to ensure that things like cannabis edibles are not being consumed on the property. I know you are committed to not doing that, but it is going to be very difficult to ensure that nobody's having a gummy bear, right? So I think that's a concern as well. And our community is expressing that concern. Your ability to ensure that cannabis isn't ingested on your property, they are concerned with that. So I have multiple concerns that I'm expressing to you. Some of them are planning based. I certainly am worried about the impact to the adjacent property owners. And I do have a concern that this access to parking areas for commercial uses is not supposed to pass through a residential zone. I don't feel that that issue has been addressed to the comfort of council from what I'm hearing. So I'm just going to express those concerns. I am going to be considering and weighing all of those issues when we go into our special council meeting this afternoon, because at that point, there is a bylaw before council that council will be making a decision about whether or not to grant this zoning amendment. And for those who are members of the public, that is when that will occur. It's part of the agenda for the special council meeting that is supposed to start at 1. Hopefully, if we get finished our planning meeting, we will be starting at 1. And it is on that agenda. So just for your knowledge, that's when a final decision will be made by council in terms of that bylaw that is being presented to council. So I think I've expressed to you my concerns as best I can at this point, and some of them are focused on the planning issues and the shared access, others and the change of use, because I feel this is a change of use, and are related to your ability to meet the requirement under the Alcohol and Gaming Commission's of overseeing that you are meeting the purpose of the legislation. So I'm just making you aware of that. Does anyone else on council have any further discussion points they want to make at this point? Meeting about this, Councillor Wilmer. Austin.
I just wanted to add for the members of the public that the special council meeting this afternoon is available on Zoom on the website, so you can watch it this afternoon.
Absolutely, yes. So all members of the public are able to watch that meeting. Okay, I don't know, at this point, I really shouldn't be going back to the public because I have had the input. I'd really rather if there's any input from council, and bear with me because my screen has council all over and they keep moving. So I do have to check where everyone is. Now, does any member of council have any further discussion or questions for the applicant at this point? If I could confirm, 1, 2, I don't see anyone who does. The CAO did have her hand up. Sue?
Yes, if I may, Madam Mayor, just a question for Mr. Whitehead. Brian, having heard all the comments, just for council knowledge, if council was to defer a decision today on granting approval for retail establishment for cannabis retail, what is your thoughts on what the applicant could provide to address the question you heard? I recognize this would mean the applicant would have to incur additional costs.
Yes, if I may, what it would mean is the applicant would need to prepare a detailed site plan. There'd have to be some topographic information collected, perhaps by Mr. Wally Simpson. There would have to be a hydrogeological study done to determine the quality and quantity of groundwater. Normally, we would take a water sample from the existing well on the property and do what's called a subdivision suite of parameters, look at the well record, the quantity of water on it from the pump test, look at the chemistry of the water, have it reviewed by a qualified hydrogeologist, do a nitrate impact assessment to determine the suitability of the lot for septic systems. There's already an existing septic system. Then we'd have to, well, those are the two big ones, and it would probably take a month or two for us to get that completed before we could bring it back to council. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I hope it does.
Thank you, Brian. I just wanted to ask the question as it was a request from a member of the public. for council consideration.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything further from council? Any further questions or discussion from council on this application? Okay, I'm
None.
not. Councillor Paprocki?
No, I said none, Mayor. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any member of council who wishes to speak further on this. Then at this point, my agenda again, and I guess we will move back to Mr. Larbetsky, who is going to proceed with the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Love. We just have item number 10. It's the draft bylaw that is attached to as well for council consideration. I don't know if there are any questions or concerns.
Okay, I will ask Council, you've seen the draft bylaw. Do you have any questions or concerns on the draft bylaw itself? Okay, not seeing any. Okay, with that, we're going to move to application number 2.
Mayor Love, if I may, excuse me.
Sorry.
Before we proceed to the application, we have had a technical difficulty. I've had an email from an Eileen Reeves who has not been able to connect to the meeting. And I was wondering whether we could take maybe a little break to see if the host can connect with Miss Reeves to bring her on, because I believe she has interest in the next application. Thank you.
Okay, I will then maybe ask, could a member of council, do we need to move to take a break? Sorry, Gwen.
Kim, can I interfere?
Yes, absolutely.
Eileen has sent me an email saying that she wanted to view the meeting, and she has been doing that online. She does not need to participate in it.
Okay, thank you very much. So she, the individual who cannot get on to the meeting due to technical difficulties is only interested in viewing. So then, Mr. Larbetsky, I guess at this point we will move to application number 2 because we've had a full hearing of application number 1.
Yes, please. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank the members of the public who are in attendance and the applicant and those in attendance for application number 1. You are welcome to stay, or you are welcome to get on with your days. And we understand that completely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So with that, I'm going to read application number 2, which is HYL 2019-12. The purpose is to hear persons' comments in regards to zoning bylaw amendment made by the applicant, Robert B. Howe of Howe and Bradley Professional Corporation, and the owner is Anne Maureen Highland. Hi, Maureen. I'm glad you were able to rejoin us at this point. I see we have Mr. Howe as well. So we have everyone who is going to participate, I believe. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Larbetsky to get this going.
Just a note, thank you, Mayor Love. Just a note to council, this application was previously before council on January the 14th, 2020. And the applicant requested that the public meeting be deferred pending submission of an amended application. So we're picking up from where we left off. So item number 11.2 is the amended application dated March 13th, 2020. Are there any questions or concerns from council?
Not seeing any. I guess if we could proceed then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 11.3 are pages 1 and 2 of the cover letter from the County of Brantford dated April the 20th, 2020. Item 11.4, County of Brantford Planning Division zoning bylaw amendment report to council dated April the 20th, 2020. Item 11.5, an email dated June the 11th, 2020 to the applicant, owner, council, and staff. We'll proceed to item number 12, the purpose and effect of the zoning bylaw amendment. The subject lands are a waterfront residential property that is 1,700 square meters or 0.42 acres in area and has water frontage along the Madawaska River, Nageek Lake. The purpose of the amendment is to rezone the subject lands to permit the construction of a new dwelling, to permit the existing sleep cabin, and to recognize the existing setbacks of the sleep cabin and firewood shed. The amendment will, item 1, reduce the water setback from 30 meters to 9.6 meters for a dwelling, reduce the front yard depth from 7.5 meters to 1.5 meters for a dwelling, reduce the side yard setback, which is the west side, from 1 meter to 0.42 meters for the firewood shed, reduce the water setback for from 30 meters, it should read, to 27.7 meters for a sleep cabin, reduce the front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 0.4 meters for a sleep cabin, and increase maximum gross floor area from 25 square meters to 28 square meters. The effect of the amendment is to rezone the subject lands from limited service residential LSR to limited service residential exception 54 LSR-E54. All other provisions of the zoning bylaw shall apply. Item number 13, report on the application and notice. Item 13.1, notice of complete application was sent out to the applicant dated April the 11th, 2020. Item number 13.2, the notice of application and public meeting were sent out to all affected property owners within 120 meters, which converts to 400 feet of the subject application, and to all public bodies as required on June the 11th, 2020. Item 13.3, notice was posted on the subject property on June the 11th, 2020. Item number 14, notice to public bodies, written responses and/or telephone messages. 14.1, Ontario Power Generation Inc., email, January the 6th, 2020, no comments or concerns. And I refer back to the original circulation. The current application was circulated. I had no further comments from Ontario Power Generation. And item 14.2, the French Public School email dated January the 8th, 2020, no comments or concerns. Once again, the amended application was recirculated. I had no response, but I placed these two items on the agenda just to refresh council's memory that there were no objections. Hydro One Networks Inc. email, June the 12th, 2020, no comments or concerns. Item number 15, written comments. 15.1, response email dated January the 7th, 2020. Paul Reeves, email dated January the 6th, 2020. I just wanted to bring this forward from the previous application. I did not receive anything subsequent to the new amended application. Item 15.2, response email dated June the 15th, 2020, confirming request by Maureen Highland to attend electronic meeting. Item 15.3, response email dated June the 29th, 2020 to Maureen Highland. Item 15.4, response email dated June 30th, 2020 to Eileen Reeves. Item 15.5, email dated June the 30th, 2020, forwarded to the applicant and the owner. Item 15.6, email dated June the 30th, 2020, received at 11:33 a.m. from Eileen Reeves. Item 15.7, email dated June the 30th, 2020, received at 2:03 p.m. from Eileen Reeves. Item 15.8, email dated June the 30th, 2020, which was forwarded to the applicant. 15.9, email dated July the 1st, 2020, from Eileen Reeves, request to be an attendee at the public meeting. Item 15.10, email dated July the 6th, 2020, from Eileen Reeves. And there were two recent additions that were not on the original agenda. Item 15.10, email dated July the 6th, 2020, from Eileen Reeves, and it was to notify of a date correction to the previous email submission. And item 15.11, email dated July the 6th, 2020 from Maureen Highland, questions relating to objections and submissions. Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to do number 16?
Yes, I just see that. It just flipped on my page here. I apologize. Item 16,
Okay.
verbal report or general or telephone inquiries and or attendances at the municipal office. Item 16.1, telephone call from Robert B. Howe, the applicant, checking on any additional objections.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, I'm going to ask if there's any oral or written presentations by those in attendance. And I would go first to the applicant, which is Mr. Howe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You've had a long morning. It's now afternoon. In any case, I had attached to the application as Schedule B a commentary basically explaining what was happening here. One thing that struck me this morning in preparing for this public meeting is that Prosceno Way itself is within 30 meters of the water's edge here. The surveyors identified the 30-meter mark as on the north side or the back side of Prosceno Way. But anyway, we have a long-established property here that was originally developed in the 60s, we think, and has a small cottage on it. Ms. Highland now is interested in, as many waterfront property owners in the municipality seem to be, in putting up something more substantial and perhaps year-round. So she has had an architect design something which she'd like to place on her property in the place of the existing cottage, which would be demolished, along with a frame shed nearby that would be overlapped, if I can use that word, by the new cottage. The new cottage will not come, dwelling or whatever it is, would not come any closer to the water than the existing structure. It would be only marginally larger if one subtracts the area of a screened-in porch that would not be otherwise heated or serviced, and would not approach as close to the edge of Prosceno Way as the existing building does. And to regularize some other features of the property, she did put up this woodshed that's near the western boundary of the property a few years back, and certainly believed at the time that she was observing the appropriate setback and relied on the contractor to see to that. But it appears from the recent survey that it's only a half a meter from the line. This is your typical three-sided building with a roof and open at the front. The sleep cabin is on the back side of Prosceno Way. Again, that replaced an existing building, and it was in there about 2009. Ms. Highland tells me that she replaced what has been referred to, and maybe even in my commentary, as a shed. But in discussing it with Ms. Highland, in fact, it was a building that wasn't just storing inanimate objects. It was used as a bit of a workshop. There were tools and whatnot kept in there, and people would work in there. There were 2 windows in it, and a sort of a double-sized door as well. So she did replace that with a building of the same exterior dimensions, and it has evolved into a sleep cabin. In other words, nobody's working with carpentry tools in there any longer, and there is a sleeping accommodation in there, but again, no cooking facilities and the old building too was wired, by the way, and as is the sleep cabin. So it has electricity, but no cooking facilities or anything like that. So it's, again, that was what happened in 2009 or thereabouts. And so we're regularizing that in terms of its location relative to Prosceno Way, its size, and in fact, its existence on a property which is smaller than properties that are supposed to be if they're going to have a sleep cabin on them. But as I say, that's all kind of existing matters to try and regularize. So I think that's all the side yard. Sorry, the side yard setback on the east side of the existing septic bed is reduced from 3 meters to 2.2. So, Ms. Highland is doing this correctly. She's had the survey. She acquired the Shore Road allowance. She's had the survey done. She's engaged an architect, and will, I think, proceed appropriately, and certainly having regard for the need not to disturb or allow material to enter the Madawaska River here. I've noticed in the planning report, as is typical, I guess, the county planner has recommended that the municipality require a scoped, I think, environmental impact assessment, which is something that Ms. Highland would be willing to carry out. They refer, I think, at one point at least to the construction phase, and certainly that any risk of nutrients or contaminants entering the river would presumably be monitored during that phase while a building permit was outstanding by the chief building official. So that I think there's a second line of defense, if I can use that, at least during the construction phase. So at any rate, unless I think the council has any questions, I think that's what the council needs to know.
Okay, thank you. Does council have, wait, before we go on to that, is there anyone who wants to speak to this application? I mean, I only have.
This is Maureen Highland. May I clarify a couple of details?
Yes.
The new structure is very modest. It's 2 bedrooms, exactly the same as the existing structure. And it is less than 225 square feet larger. It is a very, very modest structure on almost the same footprint and moves further away from the water for maybe 3/4 of it. It's a very modest structure.
Okay, thank you very much. And we don't have any other members of the public here that I can see that want to speak to the application. I'm just verifying that. So I will then at this point move on to questions and discussion from council. And I see Councillor Bromwich is quite eager to engage. So Councillor Bromwich.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just have to go over and deal with some little people over here, so I want to get this over with. I think this is just an upgrade, which is a nice thing to see. Upgrading your living quarters or your cottage is a bonus. I wouldn't want to really enforce an EIS on this lady to force her to spend extra money to, as long as they realize that the river is very temperamental with regards to fill going into it during construction phase. I know Mr. Howe said that she'd be willing to at least have what would you call it, a very shortened EIS survey done as the construction took place. I don't know if that's in council's purvey here or not, but I would like to see this approved, and I'd like to see her get on with her upgrading and improving the quality of life out there without too much damage to the bush and the shoreline. I see no problem in granting this, in my own personal opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Love. I just want to mention that I did visit the site because I wanted to make sure about the drainage in that particular area. And when I found out that the septic system was not being disturbed, it was going to remain in the same place. No other issues in terms of digging the ground that would cause erosion. I was quite relieved. I thought that would be a very good move, and I certainly wouldn't recommend that we have an EIS. I don't think it's totally not called for in this particular case. And a scope is questionable. I understand the merits of it regarding the downspouts and going towards the water and all the other things, and perhaps silt covers at the lake, which certainly wouldn't be required. But if it was felt that that needed to be done, then the lesser of the two would certainly suffice in my case. And I think it's a nice little project. There's really it's still one person using the facility, and I think it's I would have no other objections at all to that particular construction.
Okay, thank you. Does any other member of council have any questions or discussion? Councillor Wilmer.
Just wanted to say that it looks like a nice little project and I fully support it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or discussion? Okay, I do believe, Mr. Howe, I heard you say that the shoreline road allowance has been acquired.
That's correct.
Okay,
Earlier this year, I think Mr. Lorbetsky can confirm that.
yes.
Yes, that is correct, Madam Mayor.
Okay, because this is a tight squeeze. I've never received such a complex drawing with an application. I spent considerable time just trying to figure out the wherewithal of what was where, and it is a tight squeeze. So, you know, with the applicant owning the shoreline, obviously that's critical because, yeah, you don't have a lot to work with.
No.
Any concerns? I guess, Mr. Lorbetsky, if there's nothing further from council, you would be asking for a motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, please.
Okay,
Just to
Go ahead.
clarify that, Madam Mayor, a motion to the effect that an EIS study will not be required by council, so we have it for the record. Thank you.
yes, that was what I was anticipating. So could I have someone move that on looking for the application, on application HYL-2019-12, that an environmental impact study will not be required by council. Moved by Councillor Schulis, seconded by Councillor Poplinski. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. All right. So with that, then I'll turn it back over to Mr. Lorbetsky for his one-liner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item number 19 is the draft bylaw, which incorporates the items that were listed in the bullet point. Are there any questions or concerns from council?
Any questions on the draft bylaw? I'm not seeing any. Okay, thank you very much. And now I'll turn it over to Sue to read the notice.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council is also required by section 34-14.5 to inform the public at the public meeting of who is entitled to appeal to the local appeal tribunal under sections 34:11 and 19 as follows. Section 34:11, if council decides to refuse an application or refuses or neglects to make a decision on an application within 120 days of the municipal clerk receiving the application, the applicant or the Minister of Municipal Affairs may appeal to the local planning appeal tribunal by filing an appeal with the clerk of the municipality. Section 34:19, not later than 20 days after the giving of notice of passing of the bylaw, the applicant, any person or public body who made oral submissions at the public meeting or made a written submission to council before the bylaw was passed, or the Minister of Municipal Affairs may appeal to the local planning appeal tribunal by filing an appeal with the clerk of the municipality.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank everyone who has attended in regards to this application. And with that, I'm going to declare that this meeting is closed.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Again, appreciate your work and effort this morning.